Hello, good evening. Ghost Scream or Ghostface was actually a true murder case. Not some based out of Hollywood. It was based on a true murder case and everything. It happened way back in. Let's see here. Let me make sure I'm correct. It happened way back then, like in the 70s and everything. So yeah, let's get into the video, shall we? Enjoy.
Before the screens and the plastic mask, there was a myth suffocated by centuries of fear. What we know as a masked killer is only the shell. Behind the twisted smile lies an ancient force, a whisper crossing generations, feeding on what is most fragile in us, fear. This is not a tale of teenage horror. It is a descent into a real abyss, where forgotten records reveal the presence of something that was never contained, a faceless entity that found in Ghostface its modern representation. Cinema turned it into entertainment, but the truth is far more disturbing. Centuries earlier, in isolated villages, reports described a shadow walking among houses. It left no footprints, only echoes of screams and a chilling sensation. Entire families vanished on foggy nights, and survivors spoke of voices over the phone, centuries before the device even existed. The old chronicles did not mention masks, but a blank face. Men and women described the same phenomenon, a figure covered in a dark cloak, with an undefined expression that changed according to the victim's fear. For some it looked like a ghost, for others a distorted reflection of themselves. The name Ghostface, popularized in the 90s, was not born from screenwriters. In lost documents of a medieval religious order, there are mentions of a cult that sought to give form to the faceless entity. They believed that crafting a white mask was the only way to interact with this evil. But what they created was a channel. The mask was never an innocent accessory. It was used in rituals of invocation, sewn with fibers drenched in dried blood, meant to absorb the essence of whoever wore it. The wearer thought they had control, but soon discovered their mind was corroded, as if alien thoughts were whispered straight into their ear. And they were not just thoughts, they were commands. The individual began to have vivid dreams, nightmares indistinguishable from reality. They saw familiar faces begging for help, but upon waking, it all reduced to one compulsion: to spread terror. The mask transformed humans into puppets of something far darker. In 19th century America, colonists documented entire settlements devastated by paranoia. With no visible killers, people turned against one another, convinced neighbors carried the shadow. Deaths rarely came by knife. They came by panic, by madness, by total distrust. The true weapon was fear itself. When cinema gave life to the character Ghostface, it did nothing more than recycle an old curse. The image projected on screens became bait, reigniting an archetype the entity had always inhabited. With every scream in the theater, with every Halloween costume sold, it grew stronger. The myth became fuel. But the true tragedy is not in the films. It lies in the fact that in small towns with histories of grief and mourning, the figure manifests again. The masked killer is only the host's face. What acts behind it is intangible, invisible, but lethal. Ghostface is not who wears the mask. Ghostface is what the mask invokes. Possession never begins abruptly. First come the whispers. The chosen one believes they are only hearing their own conscience, but the words are not theirs. They suggest, they corrode. Then the mask finds them, as if it had always been there, waiting for the right moment. Contact is inevitable and irreversible. The host thinks they are in control. They convince themselves they wear the mask for revenge, amusement, or challenge. But in truth, their will has already been contaminated. What seemed like a simple disguise is, in fact, a bond with the entity, guiding each movement, each strike, each terrifying phone call. The phone calls reveal everything. Many believe them to be a psychological strategy, but the voice on the other end does not belong to the killer. It is shaped by the entity itself, tailored to the victim's deepest fear. Every word, every pause is chosen to tear the mind apart long before harming the body. Police records describe voices that revealed secrets never shared, hidden betrayals, buried guilt, sins never confessed. The victim, paralyzed, could not decide whether to flee or confront their own conscience. This is the true power of the entity, turning fear into a weapon, the mind into a battlefield. The Woodsboro Massacre was not the beginning, only the most publicized chapter. Billy Loomis and Stu Macker believed they were masterminds of terror, when in reality they were puppets. Already fractured by rage and obsession, they became perfect vessels for the mask. Their fate was sealed long before the murders. Sidney Prescott, the central target, was not chosen by accident. The entity did not crave just blood, but resistance. Sidney was different, strong, resilient, unbreakable. That made her the ideal prey. Breaking her mind would mean an inexhaustible feast of energy for the faceless darkness. And Woodsboro was just one modern stage. In the 19th century, a village in rural England recorded the so-called Spectre of Blackwood. Random victims, meaningless deaths. The description was identical. A cloaked figure with a blank face, hunting not out of hatred, but for the pleasure of prolonging fear. In the 1950s, in a small American town, the so-called shadow killer did not need blades. His weapon was paranoia. A whisper in one ear was enough to tear the community apart. Families turned on one another. Neighbors attacked each other. The entity did not kill directly. It made them destroy themselves. The mask itself is a trap. It does not hide identities. It creates them. The host ceases to be an individual and becomes an extension of the entity. Every gesture, every chase, every crime is an offering. The blood spilled is fuel, and prolonged terror its greatest reward. That is why Ghostface never dies. No matter how many are unmasked, imprisoned, or killed, the face underneath is always irrelevant. The true creature remains untouched, lurking. With each new host, the legend is reborn. Ghostface is not a person. Ghostface is a curse, an idea that cannot be erased. Records suggest the entity chooses its hosts with surgical precision. It does not seek the innocent, but those already marked by trauma, rage, or loneliness. Broken people who only need a push to fall into the abyss. It is within this emotional void that the mask finds its perfect home. The process is slow and subtle. At first, the host feels a strange relief when wearing the mask, as if finally finding purpose. Then comes the compulsion, phone calls, stalking, rituals of terror. Soon they can no longer distinguish their own thoughts from the orders whispered by the entity. The cruelty lies not only in the physical act. The entity prolongs the victim's suffering, savoring every drop of despair. The goal is never the quick kill, but the spectacle of panic. The true horror is psychological, invisible. By the time the body falls, the mind has long been devoured. Criminologists tried to explain Ghostface as an imitation phenomenon, a serial killer inspired by films. But these studies ignore patterns repeating long before cinema existed. The white mask and black hood are not modern inventions. They are echoes of an ancestral fear. The most disturbing detail is the voice. Victims describe different tones, adapted to each call. It is as if the entity had access to the most intimate memories of whoever answers. Some swore they heard the voice of deceased loved ones. Others, their own voice, twisted into impossible tones. This power reveals the mask is not a disguise, but a portal. The fabric absorbs the host's vital energy, allowing the entity to shape reality around them. Objects seem to move on their own. Shadows stretch without light, and victims feel hunted even in crowds. Nowhere is truly safe. Communities struck by Ghostface rarely recover. Even after the killer is caught, paranoia lingers. Neighbors distrust one another, families disintegrate, and silence becomes law. It is as if the entity's presence never truly dissipates. Fear continues to haunt those streets. The media, fascinated by spectacle, only strengthened the myth. Sensational headlines, films, and costumes turned Ghostface into a pop icon. But such popularity carries a darker price. Every time the mask is worn as a joke, the entity finds new cracks to manifest once again. The boldest investigators warn, Ghostface is not an individual killer, but a cycle, a pattern spanning eras and borders. Whenever there is collective pain, whenever a town carries grief and secrets, the mask returns. It is not just a symbol of fear, it is fear itself, embodied. The real danger lies in believing it is only fiction. That is the very deception the entity wants. While the world laughs, dresses up, and consumes Ghostface's image, it grows stronger, unseen. With every trivial scare, a new host is prepared. And when least expected, the mask breathes again. There are undisclosed records of entire families vanishing after events linked to the mask. Houses remained intact, doors locked, yet residents disappeared without a trace. On the walls, investigators found only sketches of blank faces, as if someone had tried to reproduce the white visage of the entity. Survivors' diaries reveal even more disturbing details. Many reported that, before the attacks, they were tormented by silent phone calls, footsteps in hallways, and the sensation of being watched at night. It always began with small signs, until sanity was slowly corroded by constant fear. The pattern is always the same. Psychological isolation precedes physical attack. First, the mind is broken. Then, the body is hunted. The victim, weakened, can no longer distinguish reality from nightmare. It is at this point Ghostface strikes. When the scream erupts, resistance is already gone. Woodsboro was not the only modern epicenter. Confidential police files from Ohio and rural Texas describe identical cases. Masks found near crime scenes, enigmatic phone calls, and victims chosen for their deepest fears. Each occurrence seemed like another piece of the same puzzle. And what makes Ghostface so unique among icons of terror? Unlike supernatural monsters, he is not confined to one body or one time. The mask is the vessel, but the essence is incorporeal. It can be anywhere, in anyone. This malleability is what makes it eternal and impossible to stop. Some believe Ghostface is, in truth, a reflection of humanity itself, a mirror of our thirst for violence, our obsession with fear. The entity merely awakens what already lies inside us. The blank face does not represent the other, but the emptiness within each of us, waiting for its chance to surface. Cinema helped camouflage the truth. By turning Ghostface into entertainment, the industry created a smokescreen. Audiences laugh, scream, and consume the myth without realizing they are feeding what the mask symbolizes. Laughter disguises dread, but never cancels it. On the contrary, it strengthens it. In interrogation recordings, some masked killers confessed one thing in common. They did not remember every act committed. They described memory gaps, as if watching themselves from outside their bodies. This dissociation proves they were never fully in control. They were puppets, guided by an invisible hand. Victims also reported inexplicable phenomena. Radios turning on by themselves, mirrors reflecting strange faces, shadows moving against the light. Details suggesting Ghostface is not only physical, he is psychic. He is the distortion of reality, seeping into the smallest corners of the mind until it is fully dominated. The most terrifying truth is that Ghostface does not need to be present to exist. Belief is enough. Fear is enough. He is a parasite, feeding on stories, news, films, and nightmares. Each time we say his name, each time we recall the mask, we reignite the flame that keeps the darkness alive. Occult researchers claim Ghostface cannot be destroyed,